A huge part of the success of any website comes down to picking up the right images and visuals to use. On today's video, we're going to talk about which image should you use, how to pick the right one for your website. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, what is up? My name is Ron Segal. Welcome back to the free web design course. So a website at the end of the day comes down to having some text and images together, coming together to tell some kind of a story or an experience, to sell something, teach something, convey some kind of a message on the website itself. Now, let's get started. There's basically 3 steps, I think, to coming up and using the right images. The first step is you have to decide on which style you're going to use, which kind of a genre of an images, whether it is a photography, an illustration of some sort, understanding which genre you're going to be working with. The second step is going to be how to pick the right image within this genre. And the third step is how to use it correctly inside the website in terms of layout, how to compose the image and the text together. So let's go ahead and try to break down these 3 steps. So the first step, the genre. Which genre should we use? I have here a board where I'm collecting some kind of examples of websites that I like, and I break them down to styles. So some of the styles are photography, which is basically very common, having some images from a camera and then laying them out next to some text, or using them in the background, or using some kind of a video, but this is kind of real life photography. Then another style would be having some kind of illustrations, whether they are kind of like vector-based, computer-generated Illustrator, or something that looks more like a little bit of a handmade illustration. Obviously, choosing the different types conveys a little bit of a different feel and a message to it. We do have some 3D renderings, which allows for different possibilities and also have a different feel to it. So how do you know, by the way, I do recommend that you also collect and categorize types of visuals that you like. It's really useful at a later point to communicate with your clients, or just kind of having something to pick from when you're starting a project. So you look at these different genres, how do you know which one is the right one for you? So each one of these categories have a different feel to it, right? Photography is something very, very realistic. So you can really see, and we as people, we really connect when we see people's faces and real scenarios. So this really grounds you up in reality. If you want to show a product, how it really looks, if you want to show a person, if you want to tell some kind of a real story, a lot of the time we're going to be using photography because that's really ground us in reality. Using illustration is a very, very, again, broad kind of a genre that has a lot of subgenres within it, but that kind of allows you to go into a more of an abstract kind of place. Let's take these examples. Here you can see some kind of a machine or some kind of a process that you couldn't really show in one image, and by having an illustration that kind of creates a metaphor for this, it allows us to tell a more complex story within one visual. So I would say that using illustration is a lot of times appropriate where you want to tell stories, where you need to have a little bit of a more complex story and you want to use some kind of a metaphor. That's also, illustration and 3D are not that different in the sense that, you know, you can tell abstract stories. The thing about 3D is that it kind of combines the reality of, you know, real world rendering. So in this case, you can see kind of maybe a card or a phone that really looks like they could have been from real life, but you can put them in scenarios, you can make them and turn them into something that you couldn't have done in real life. So the first kind of step is to think about which one should be appropriate in my case, and that really depends on the subject matter or the brand that you're working on, right? Is it something that is really grounded in reality that you really need to show something, or is it a little bit more complex that you would need to use some kind of a metaphor to tell that story? So that's the first step. Now, let's say that you have decided, on photography, for example. Now, photography is such a broad thing. How can you understand that you're using the right image? First of all, let's talk about where do you actually go ahead and get those images. So there's basically 2 steps here. One, you're going to go ahead and create those images yourself, or second off, you can go ahead and buy them from, you know, places that actually sell these types of images. And the question of whether you should create it or buy it is usually a lot of times comes down to budget. If you have a lot of budget, the ideal thing would be to go ahead and create kind of a unique visual that only your website has. It again places you in a very unique place, because when you usually buy an asset online, a lot of people have probably also bought it, and it kind of puts you in a place that, you know, your website might look like somebody else's website, and you usually don't want to be there. But again, it comes down to budget. So when you're creating it, there's again two options here. Either you do it yourself or you hire as a professional to do it. Now, as I've mentioned, there's a lot of different skills that comes down here: photography, illustration, or 3D rendering. There's a lot of skills. In general, I like to promote kind of the full stack designer mentality, where I think that if you learn as many skills as you can bring a lot of value. And I, for myself, really like photography, and so I've developed that photography. And so when it comes down to building websites, a lot of time I can actually take the photos myself. But when it comes down to 3D, even though I'm really into 3D, I never took the time to actually develop that skill myself. So at this point, I have to hire other experts that can do that for me. However, if you have the time and willingness to build up those kind of visual creating skills, it will be super useful, whether you like illustration or you want to develop some 3D skills. I do recommend that you familiarize with these kind of skills, so that maybe you can create them yourself. So either you create them or hire somebody else to create them. That's in the case where you have budget. If you have less budget, you usually go ahead and buy them from kind of stock photography website. This is the one that I usually use for most things. It's called Shutterstock. You either buy credits or subscription, and then you can download images, and you can see they basically have both images. They also have vectors here. So if I'm going to write something like a dog, you can see that, you know, we can have things coming up that are photography, but also illustration. And this is where you can get images in a very, very relatively cheap place, because you can buy an image between, I think, $1 to $5, and then you can work with them. Now, even if you're working from here, you still need to think about, how do I pick the right image, right? And there's a variety of quality. By the way, I also want to show another resource that's called Pexels. This is basically kind of a scraper that brings images from free sources. So if you would look for dogs here, these are actually free images that you can use. It's a little bit more limited, but then again, it's free. So if you're working on free projects, for example, I would check out Pexels to grab free images from here. However, you should be careful when you're choosing images. I just want to show kind of like, I've downloaded a few dogs images, and I want to show you an example. I hope that you can see from the image that I'm showing you that this is not such a high quality image. It's probably taken by somebody who's shooting it with their mobile phone or something like that. You can see that the pixel is a little bit grained out. It's not really high quality. This is a little bit higher quality, but I'll show you in a second when it comes down to using it that this is probably not a good idea to use this image. There's a lot of kind of contrast of shadows here. That this image is a little bit messy. There's a lot of things going on here, and this is actually a pretty good photo, right? We have the dog in focus, and the background is kind of blurred, which focuses us on this. So this image is a little bit clearer and nicer. So when you're picking out the right image, you already need to consider a little bit about how I'm going to use it, right? A lot of times, as we've mentioned, we need to use it in a context of there's going to be text somewhere next to it or near to it. So let me jump here into Photoshop, for example, because I just want to show you how these images would come to be if we would use them in some kind of a, let's say, dog-related website. So let me just throw in, let's imagine that this is a website and I want to put the images here in some kind of a layout like this, full screen, and I'm going to put them right here. So we have the three images. Now here, you can see already that this image is a little bit less quality, but let's say we also need to have some kind of a title here. Let's say, we save dogs. We save dogs for a living. I don't know, maybe it's some kind of a website that, you know, oh, very nice font. Not such a relevant font, but let's say that this is some kind of a website for, you know, a nonprofit that saves dogs. And you're going to have this title, of text somewhere here, but as you can see right now, we don't have really where to position this text because it's really wherever we put it, it's going to overlay the dog, and it's going to be just a very, very confusing layout where it's not very readable. And actually the same is here, right? We can't use a white text on this image because, we can't really see the type. Even if the type would be black, because of this high contrast here, we can't really see it here as well. When we have the last photo, this one, because we have this kind of a layout, right, where we have here a lot of empty space, which is blurred. Let me flip this image. So I'm going to go transform, flip horizontally. Now we actually have a little bit of a space here that we can place the text here, and it looks a little bit better. So this is an image where we can work with. So my takeaways from this example for you would be to think about how this image is going to be used. So first of all, make sure that the image is high quality. Make sure that there is some kind of a layout within the image. The subject is clear. You have a space where you might need to position your text, so make sure that there is a space. Make sure that there is contrast in the background, and make sure that it's kind of a simplified. There's not too many details like in this image where there's just so many details that you can't really focus on anything. So those are kind of some tips about picking up the right image and then how to use it in the context of a website. Obviously, this is just the beginning, but I do recommend you as a first step to go ahead and try to collect yourself, familiarize yourself with different styles, pick up references that you like. You can go on websites like Awards or Lapa Ninja, where they're showing examples of very beautiful websites. Start to collect and familiarize yourself with the different styles, and then try to find examples of, oh, this image would be a good image within that style, or this image will be hard to work with. So this is just a basic idea of how we're going to work with images, and in the next video we're going to put this into action, into actual web design. I hope you found this video useful. There's a lot more videos coming up in this free web design course, so make sure that you're subscribed and hitting that bell button because lots of videos coming up, multiple per week. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.